Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to embark on a journey. You know when you go to science museums and you see kind of like the evolution of dinosaurs, or like kind of really just the evolution of everything, and you like going back, it all makes sense, right? Now, sometimes when you're living through it, you might not understand the significance of what's happening around you. But as I said, life works in funny ways. When you look back, it all makes sense. And today we're taking a time machine through the social media marketing industry. And we're gonna see how, looking back, how it all makes sense and how really this industry was molded. And by the time that I really kind of came in and started sharing what I was doing and kind of my philosophy around it, everyone has different opinions on the best way to run an agency, etc., etc. But when I really started to make my imprint on the industry in 2018, how over the last 3 years things have really started to change, and just get a high level view of the old archaic thinking when it comes to agencies, the more modern relevant version, but that's still dated. And you never want to be that person. You always want to be ahead of the curve. And in today's module, I'm going to go ahead and give that to you. So with no further ado, let's get straight into it. Ladies and gentlemen, in today's module, we are talking about the Agency 3.0 model. So in today's teaching, we're going to go over the Agency 1.0 and 2.0 model, plus its pitfalls, specialization, cash flow, and investment flywheel, the core of what we're offering, what is the arbitrage economy, why clients deter from hiring in-house, why $500 to $6,000 a month investments really don't phase clients. I will admit anything past that, 100% it does. Contractor mindset and why they don't start their own agency, roadmap to $10,000 per month, and the journey that lays ahead for you. So let's talk about the evolution of agencies. Now let's talk about the 1.0 agency. And by the way, you guys need to understand that we're really in an echo chamber outside of our little like weird band, like brotherhood, even though we got brothers and sisters in this weird little, like we're almost like this weird little like internet cult, right? Where we figured out that, you can have this business model and then you can optimize the shit out of it. So it's almost like a bit of a hack, right? But you need to understand that we're outliers. You need to understand that 95% of agencies out there are still these 1.0 agencies. So really, what dictates a 1.0 agency? Well, the first thing is a swanky office, right? They have this super swanky office, this nice coffee machine. I've been saying this stuff for years, and they do all of this because they think that the client is impressed by it. And the client really never even visits their office. Next thing is payroll. They payroll a lot of staff, and also in their mind, I guess this is part of having an office. They are geographically handcuffed to where they are. When they're hiring, the global market isn't, what they can pull from. It's just geographically the city that they're in. Now, in terms of services, a client will ask, hey, do you do Pinterest ads? Of course. Yeah, of course we do. Do you do web design? We got you covered. They think that you want to cast your net as wide as possible. So that way you can get as many clients and, as many different services and as many different niches. And going on this point about niches, in their mind, because they're a full service agency, and I think this has a lot to do as well, because when your expenses are that high, you're stressed out. In our model, I'm going to be honest, if you don't, if we go 3 months without signing a client, yes, it kind of stings or it kind of hurts, but it's not a matter of like, hey, if we don't sign a client, like we can't keep the lights on. And for a lot of 1.0 agencies, that's the case. Now, in terms of margins, you can expect a 3 to 15% margin. And like you heard me correct, like I'm not joking here, right? You can, and by the way, I've spoken to my accountant about this a lot, because he's asked me, and the firm has asked me, like, how your margins are so high and you have an advertising agency. And this is back in 2018. I think now it's a little bit more normal. And I was like, well, I run it this way and this way. And, in terms of my hiring pool, my team is based here and there. And they're like, and I asked them just out of curiosity, like what, when it comes to your agency clients, clients of theirs that have web design agencies, graphic design agencies, ad agencies, whatever it may be, like what sort of margins are you seeing? And they literally told me 5 to 15%. And I've talked to other actual agency owners and traditional ones, and they've said as low as 1 or 2% before. Like it's insane. Like it's literally insane. The good thing is that this is a dying breed. I mean, COVID really shook these agencies out of the market. And in all fairness, of course, it's terrible what happened with COVID. But for me, I look at businesses that weren't ready for COVID, and I'm like, what did you expect? Right? Like, honestly, what did you expect? But even with that whole ordeal, I will say that I'm serious. Majority of agencies out there still follow this 1.0 model. Now, the 2.0 agency model is, in my opinion, was birthed in early 2016, primarily by Ty Lopez.
Knowledge.
I'll say anyone who is here today has a lot to thank for him. And even me, I'm very grateful for him because it's funny because while that whole thing was going on, I didn't know about SMMA or agency or this, that until probably mid 2017 when I signed my first client of August 2016. For me, it wasn't like I have an SMMA or I have an agency. It was like I'm delivering a service to a client and there's a certain amount of deliverables and they're paying me monthly. It was just that's it. For me, it was about as complex as, when I was personal training my friends' parents and they were paying me per session, or when I was doing video jobs, it was that same concept, except it was a monthly commitment. That's really the extent of what it was for me. But really what Ty did was he opened people's eyes to the fact that hey, you can start a service-based business. And if you're going to start a service-based business, you might as well go for high ticket clients. And then if we're talking about high ticket clients, who are the most high ticket clients? Businesses. And then what is the thing that's most important to businesses? It's getting more leads, getting more customers. So really what it is just going up the pecking order and going, hey, if I'm going to spend my time on something and I'm going to deliver a service to someone, let me find people who can afford it. And then also let me deliver the thing that's most valuable to them, right? So I don't care what anyone says. Everyone in here have a lot to be grateful to Ty about. Now, bless him, Ty is a very smart businessman. I just, I don't think his, really his heart is in it. Obviously, he's never really been in the trenches and run an agency himself. And there's nothing wrong with that. As I said, he brought so many people's awareness to it. But really the main issue with this 2.0 model is it's very there's not a lot of critical thinking, right? Especially when it comes to pricing. It's, hey, you charge clients $1,000 to $3,000. It's wait, hold up. But why? What case are we putting forward for this? And then worse, it was that, there was multiple packages that you offer and, you can work with multiple niches. So really what it was a more refined version of the 1.0, right? So you scrap the physical offices and then you also start to look globally in terms of your marketplace. And, you work with VAs or you work with contractors, et cetera, et cetera. But it just needed a little bit more refinement. And funnily enough, the agency owners that utilize this 2.0 model, even though it's very immature in a lot of ways, as I said, there needs to be a little bit more critical thinking about some of the systems in the business. But even with all that said, you got these and I say this with no disrespect, right? Because I would ladies and gentlemen, I had this 2.0 agency without knowing it for the first 18 months of my agency life, right? When I say, there's these dummy agency owners, literally some dumbass 17-year-old kid who had a creative agency, was making $25K a month at his height when he was 17 years old, not auto billing clients, not getting their card on file, manual bank wire for every single client, working with multiple niches. I remember there was this one time that I sent a proposal to one of my clients because they asked for web design, SEO, and I spent maybe 10 hours on this proposal, right? And looking back, I'm just why? I was gonna have to outsource everything, and after all the outsourcing costs and the stress and everything like that, I could have spent that time trying to find a new client. So anyways, my point is when I say, these dummy agency owners, I'm referring to even myself right back then, right? And I'm poking fun at myself. So the hilarious thing is you get these really veteran, because here's the thing, to have a 1.0 agency where you have physical office, you have payroll, you need to be a pretty smart entrepreneur, because you need to have the ability to sign clients and be at a decent level in terms of entrepreneurship, because you need to have enough revenue to support those expenses. Whereas with a 2.0 model, you could just come in and just sign a couple clients and just be a bit of an, with me, just no thinking as to why I'm pricing my clients, back in 2017, the way that I was. And you can just be a little bit of a dummy like I was and not have any critical thinking. And you'd still make more profit than these 1.0 agency owners. So that's why I'm saying there's so much to be grateful for that 2.0 agency model. And really what that 2.0 model did was it took the baton from the 1.0, right? And it got it from here to here, but there was still such a distance. And that's really where this 3.0 model comes in. So ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about the 3.0 agency model. So really what we're doing is we're merging both of the positive aspects of both models, right? With the 1.0 model, the thing that's incredible is company culture, right? Company culture and actually building something tangible, right? Not just a party trick. So you've got the company culture, the strong brand, the vision and the structure that comes from a 1.0 agency. And then you've got the leanness of the 2.0 model. And really the mission of the 3.0 model is very simple. Pick one niche, one service, and aim to be the best at that. It's as simple as that. And a few key principles is you always do what's best for the client. You never have an office and you always keep things lean. Revenue is a vanity metric. We only focus on profit just as long as it is not at the expense of the client experience. You spend your most productive hours on outreach or lead flow. And that's where 70% of your attention and focus goes. And the only really two objectives you have here is get clients amazing results and build your cash reserves. Not make money, not make revenue, but build your cash reserves. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is available for download right below this video. And this is the 3.0 agency principles. As I said, you only have two objectives: get great client results and build your cash reserves. You spend most of your productive hours on outreach and 70% of your time focused there. You're a prospecting machine. And as I said, you always do what is best for the client. Now, really the name of the game here is specialization, cash flow, and simplicity. Now, the agency model is so amazing because of the incredible profit margins, but really where most people go wrong, and this grinds my gears so much when I hear people say, agency owners go, oh, just reinvest it back into the business. Sometimes I hear people say stuff and I'm like, are you trying to scream to the world that you've never fucking run an agency? Like, how are you meant to reinvest? Like, guys, this is someone who's been running an agency for 5 years. I am telling you that is the biggest load of horseshit. Because especially, right? And here's the thing, once you're getting up to like 10K a month or something like that, right? You can invest in a new computer. You can invest in team, right? Especially once you hire that first employee. And as I said, this doesn't need to be someone with a $10,000 a month salary. I'm going to show you guys how to hire incredible talent full-time for $1,500 a month, $2,000 a month, $2,500 a month. And these people are so grateful because they're actually getting a 100% pay rise from what they're already doing when you start looking at the global market. And there's no one else on earth who knows the global market of contractors in the internet marketing space as well as I do. So I know all the prices in all the countries and what to look out for. I'm going to share all of that with you. So, you know, yes, of course, there's a couple things that you can invest in. But when you get to my stage in an agency, we're making 150K a month profit. Like, what do you want me to invest in? Like, we get 80% of our clients through ads, but like, apart from that, what else do you want me to invest in, right? So it's even at like, once you're at 20, 30K. So the biggest issue I see in this industry is people don't realize, ladies and gentlemen, here's what I really need you to get through your head. Until you talk about, and there are further paradigms, and you know, there's actually an agency 4.0 model, which I'll talk about in just a little bit. And that's kind of the stage where I'm at right now, where really I'm a private equity / agency incubator. And by 2025, all the clients we have at the agency, I will have equity in. We will not work with clients unless we have equity in that. And that's how you get to $500,000 a month or $1 million a month with your agency, right? But until you get to that point, there's actually a step before that. And that's getting to a point where you take 70% of your agency profits every single month and you invest it. Ladies and gentlemen, I have made an equal amount of money from my investments as I have from my agency. Ladies and gentlemen, an agency is not there to sell. Now, eventually, later down the line, maybe you can sell it, right? And maybe you can prepare it to sell it. But the real benefit, like you need to, you know, as I said, like it's funny for me when I see these other agency owners, I'm like, you're quite clearly very unself-aware because you don't know what this business is for. I've always known what this business is for. This business is not the thing that on my deathbed, I'm going to go, oh, wow, like I'm so happy, like I managed to serve all those clients. Of course, it's rewarding to me to see what we're able to do for our clients' businesses. But for me, this business is the thing that retired my mom. This thing is the thing that lets me live in the house I live in, buy the watches I buy, go on the holidays that I buy, right? Like it's the thing that lets me extract 30% a month from it and enjoy my life. And then the other 70% goes into investments. And that's the reason why I don't ever need to work again. That's the reason why at the age of 21, I've got 10 million net after tax. So I'm done. Like I won this game. And even if I really stop going hard with entrepreneurship, I know that in no matter what, my agency will always make me $1 million in profit. So what that means is I can always just live off of 300 to 400K with that. And by the way, if though, you know, 300, 400K sounds like a lot, look, I have a very good investment portfolio. I've been very smart with my money. So 400K really isn't an issue. And even with that much in spending, every year I can add an extra 600 to 700K into my investment portfolio. And at a 10% yield, which I know some people are like, oh, you can't get 10%. Well, I have done far, far better than that. And it's not just from one investment. I have 4 different asset classes that I invest in, and not your traditional ones, not stocks, not real estate, although I will be getting into that very shortly, but sure as hell not getting into real estate in the US or the UK. Like that's not a game you want to play. But this is higher level stuff that we talk about in Meridian Mastermind, which is really for people that want to get to the level that I'm at and get to a point where the agency, like they know what it's there for. It's there to build their cash reserves, go into their investments. And then also later you get to a point, as I said, where I'm at, where a company can come to me, we can run their ads, and we not only run their ads, but we can be a full service agency for them because I have equity in them. And there's already deals coming to me like that right now. I mean, you know, one that I can think of, if I'd invested, and actually one of my buddies did this, in Oura Ring, which was a client of ours back in 2018 to 2019 for a long time. And funny enough, Oura Ring actually offered me equity in exchange to drop the retainer because it was a 5-figure plus a month retainer. And this idiot said no. Going back, I wish I could have done things differently. But my point is, let's say that was a situation where I was now, and I see the potential in this thing. I am the sole agency that represents this company. And let's say I got to a point right now where I invest $1 million as well. I can't say specifics, but just I know through some of my circle and stuff like that, that 1 million would be worth many, many multiples more, 10 to 20 times multiple more. And there we go. That is how you win this game, ladies and gentlemen. Like, people don't understand. You can make hundreds of millions through this, but you need to play the game right. And I know I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here, and I apologize, but that's because this is stuff that really, really excites me. But we need to really go through these different evolutions. And the biggest blessing that this thing gives you is free cash flow. Remember that. Your agency, the biggest blessing it gives you is consistency, stability, and cash flow. And the other big thing about agency, and I've seen this with so many other business models, ladies and gentlemen, I've seen it with coaches, consultants, people who have courses, like it goes like this, and then it never comes back. I've seen it again and again and again. I mean, at Agency, we have to work twice as hard every single year just to get the same result. I'm sure you've seen with the platform and the team that I have, and I'm sure you've seen my operations. Like, this is the level of extent that we need to go to just to get the same results every single year. I've seen it with my friends in e-com who, have a winning product and it lasts for 18 months, or even have a brand, like it's all branded. And after 18 months, the market just goes, I'm not really that interested, right? But name one lawyer who makes less money when they're 48 than they do when they're 32. But name one lawyer who makes less money at the age of 54 than they do at 42. Name one doctor who makes less money at the age of 49 than they do at 41. It doesn't happen. That's because when you're in the service-based industry, the more years you have under your belt, the more you can command. And that's the beautiful thing about agency is, guys, it is so unsexy. I'm really sorry to tell you, this business model is so uncool. Like, guys, think about it. Like, we're providing services for business. It's not cool at all, right? But what it is let's take a 5-year journey. It's this. And it just keeps, like, if you think things are good now, let's say you're running an agency, you think things are good now, you have no idea what's about to come. And then when you marry that up with the Agency 4.0 model, which I'll talk about in future phases, let's focus on really dialing in the 3.0 model. That's when you really get to fuck you money. Like, I mean, proper fuck you money. Whew, getting ahead of myself here. But I really just want to drill that home for you guys. So let's get back to the training. So I know I've kind of already done this, but once again, let's just get real clear on what we're actually doing here. As I said, I really want to get clear here because sometimes the waters can get murky. All we are doing here is we are delivering a service where the ROI, whether that be monetary or perceived, is higher than the fee that we're charging. Okay, so we're charging a lower fee than the either monetary or perceived ROI. As I said, ROI mostly comes in the form of monetary, but it can also be in the form of reclaimed time, reclaimed convenience, or reclaimed, sort of thought space in someone's brain. And that's it. Welcome to the really unsexy business that we're a part of. And as I said, I wanted to make this clear because sometimes the waters can get murky and you can forget really what we're doing here. So ladies and gentlemen, this is available for download right below. We're delivering services in the arena of marketing where our fee is lower than the trackable or assumed ROI. This ROI is mainly monetary, but sometimes it can be an ROI on reclaimed time. Now let's look at who the winners are in our current economic climate. Uber. What does Uber do? Uber connects the Uber driver with the end customer and wraps it up under the Uber experience. When I go on Airbnbs, I know that I'm paying, especially some of the Airbnbs I'm staying at are very expensive. I know that I'm paying a very hefty amount to Airbnb in service fee in order to source and manage that whole experience. There's private rental companies that you can go to. And by the way, they will offer you a cheaper rate. Of course they will. And there's even been situations before where I have stayed at a place and I could get it 10 or 15% cheaper and go directly to the landlord, but I still do on Airbnb because I just have that safety and I feel it gives me that warm and fuzzy feeling. So just remember, the person that wins is not the person that delivers the service. It is the person who orchestrates it. You do not want to be the pianist or the violinist. You want to be the orchestrator. Now, in all fairness, this shouldn't really be news to you, right? Let's look at, the slow, archaic 1.0 agencies, right? Like, they've got offices. So let's look at a massive agency out there. They're paying their team, even in like places like New York, LA, London, they're paying their team $24,000 a year, $30,000 a year, maybe if they're lucky, $40,000 a year. And they're charging like Pepsi and Coca-Cola and like massive agencies $40,000 a month retainers, right? All they're doing is taking these big retainers and they're charging a lot, and then they're paying their team a sliver of that, right? And it's funny because with the people who we're going to be hiring, whether that be contractor or full-time team members, they're going to be getting a much higher percentage of the overall agency revenue as a comparison to the people who work at these large-scale agencies. So this isn't really this shouldn't be news to you. It's just when you take away the office and like the idea of like this big company, like people are like, oh, what, that model still works? Of course it still works. I mean, even just look at private clinics. What is it? It's physicians, right? It's people in the healthcare space, but at the end of the day, who still makes majority of the money? It's the clinics. So really what we're doing here is we're using the Airbnb and Uber model, but the key here is cash flow. And this is really where in 2018, when I started talking about contractor arbitrage, and finally, the rest of the industry listened and we're like, oh, when you explain it like that, it makes sense, right? When you explain the Uber Airbnb business model and just applying that to an agency, that makes sense. And the real, ding, 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 like people finally got it, is basically when I talked about how the cash is divvied out. Because you charge your client on day one, right? Because you charge your client on day one for the next 30 days services rendered, right? Because you're working, the minute they pay, you get to work. And then your contractor is all, in the same contractor or full-time employee, and you'll get to that stage later down the line, once you're at 10, 15, 20K a month, this person works in accordance to how all employees work, which is you do the work and then you get paid. Whereas with agencies, the norm is you pay them and then they do the work, right? And because of that, this gives free cash flow. So what you're doing is it's almost like what you're doing is you're being very smart with the cash flow because you're getting paid on day one. So you don't need any money to hire a contractor because you get paid on day one and then you pay them on day 30. And it's just as simple as that. And this is what arbitrage is. This is how people get super fucking wealthy. They use arbitrage and they use leverage. And the smartest investors are the ones who do it with no risk. And that's what we're doing right here. Now, with all of this, you can go down two routes. You can either use contractor arbitrage if you don't know how to deliver the services yourself. But if you have a high level of competency, or when you go through our 50 module behemoth service delivery section, you might go, actually, I want to go ahead and I want to deliver the services myself. And that's totally fine. You can use either model that you want. It's up to you. Now, you might be wondering, why don't they just hire someone in-house for the price they pay me? As I said, why don't I just go direct to the Airbnbs that I've already stayed at and get a discount? As I said, I want less risk. I want to wrapped under the Airbnb experience. I want flexibility and I want safety and security that I'm not dealing with one specific person. I'm dealing with someone who, operationally, this is what they do. Okay, most businesses don't want to handle this stuff in-house because the idea of bringing someone on, and especially if they bring someone on or a team on, they're going to have to hire them full-time, and then there's going to be costs to firing them, and this whole debacle for something that's it could be a risk for them. And then the worst part is they won't even know how to manage this person. Look, you could have the best talent on earth, but if you don't know how to be the orchestrator, which is what I'm teaching you how to be here, then it doesn't matter. Now, the next sort of roadblock that I kind of want you to get over is you might be thinking, wow, like $500 a month or even $6,000 a month retainers, like that's a lot of money, right? And you're correct if this is someone's personal money. You need to understand, for me, if there's something that costs £10,000, right, and it's coming from my personal account, I think long and hard about it. But if it's coming from the business, like I don't even look at it twice, as long as I actually know that it helps the business. You need to understand that a regular e-commerce business net, right? I'm talking after everything is said and done, has 15 to 40% margins, right? So let's say a very standard e-commerce business out there that's making, $50,000 a month in revenue. Well, then that means that their expenses, their monthly outflow is between $30,000 to $42,000 a month. So do you really think that a $2,000 a month base service fee, and then, let's say you add performance, but that performance is only on whatever you make for them, and I'll show you how to structure all these deals. You really think that's going to scare them? And you need to remember that even your local coffee shop, they're probably spending $50,000 to $80,000 a month, especially if you live in a big city and they're on a good street. They're spending $50,000 to $80,000 a month, between 6 staff, between the actual location, their rental cost, their lease cost, equipment, utilities, bills, council taxes that they'll need to pay. They're already spending $50,000, $80,000 a month, like a little crappy coffee shop. You think an extra $1,500 a month is really going to phase them? By the way, I don't actually necessarily recommend coffee shops, and we'll get into which niches to go into because By the way, like I see this all the time. It cracks me up. People are like, "Oh, local lead, local lead gen is dead." No, it's not. Like not at all. It's just you need to do high ticket local lead gen. So I would, and we'll get into that in future modules. So I wouldn't recommend coffee shops personally. But yeah, lead gen is not dead. It's actually, in my opinion, right now kicking e-commerce ass. And this is, by the way, coming from someone who runs an e-commerce agency and is, after this whole thing is finally done and launched, is actually about to start a sister agency that's going to be local lead gen. So like, guys, like I'm being very honest with you here. So once again, just remember, like we want to, make sure the waters aren't murky. All we're doing here is we're delivering services in the arena of marketing where our fee is lower than the trackable or assumed ROI. As I said, this ROI is mainly monetary, but sometimes it can be an ROI on reclaimed time. Now, the next thing I really want to get through your head is the difference between an investment and an expense, and feel certain with what bracket you fall into, right? Because for business owners, an expense is office cleaner, merchant fees. An investment is you, right? Expense, employees, accountant. These are all things that it's like there's no real discernible ROI. And as I said, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to show you which services you can offer. And even if you're offering a convenience offer rather than an ROI offer, and I'll get into exactly what that is, we can still, we'll still pitch and we'll still frame your service in a way where there is a discernible ROI, and we can get a client to agree on it, and your client can get a rough estimation as to what this is actually bringing them back. Right? So please understand there's a big difference between an expense and an investment, and you fall into the investment bracket. Now, your next question is, you might be wondering, okay, yeah, but why would a contractor work with us? And as I said, there's no one on earth who understands the market for internet marketing contractors better than I do, right? I've spoke to hundreds, probably thousands of different contractors in this space between myself, Danny, my CMO, in the multiple rounds of hiring that we've done. I've spoken to people in London, in Paris, in New York, in Bogota, in Rio de Janeiro, in Tbilisi, which is by the way in Georgia, for anyone who doesn't know. I've spoken to people in all walks of life, right? People from South Africa, people from India, people from Singapore, people from Italy, like everywhere. I know how much each country charges, and I know the strengths and weaknesses of them. And let me give you some context right here. If you're speaking to someone in Serbia, South Africa, or Brazil, as an example, these people are working full time, for a salary of $600 to $1,200 a month, dollars. And that's considered a good salary. Bear in mind, you're paying them in dollars or pounds or euros, but you're paying them in those currencies. And by the way, if you're based somewhere else, then I recommend, because you should be charging your client, especially if, let's say you're from Georgia, as an example, I recommend you charge all of your clients in USD. So then you'll be paying your team in USD as well. So you need to understand that the way we work with them, where to start, we're working on a per month, per client basis. So let's say with this person, let's say you're working with someone in Brazil and you're paying them $300 a month and you're paying them $300 per month per client, and you give them 3 clients, that's $900 right there. I guarantee you that's more than they make of their job. I know these markets better than anyone else, I'm telling you. And they don't need to travel for it. They have flexibility. And when you get to a point where you're making $10,000, $15,000 a month, and you bring them on for a $2,000 a month salary, I cannot tell you what that means to someone in these countries. And you might be going, oh, well, they could just build their own agency, or they could get one client. And yeah, you're right. But some people just don't want to do it. You need to understand that entrepreneurs are rare breeds. Some people just really don't want to do it. Okay. And the other thing you need to understand, and you can tell, especially once you have you've got some contractor you're working with and you're looking to make them full time. And, let's say they're already making from 3 clients, $1,200 a month, or even, let's say from 4 clients are making $2,000 a month, and you want to bring them on at $2,500 a month salary. And we'll talk in detail about this later down the line. You might be wondering, okay, but yeah, why would they come on? Well, the reason is because, hey, having an agency, things happen. You might lose 2 clients. And if they're getting $2,000 a month, there we go. That's 50% of their income. They're managing 4 clients and you're paying them $500 per, and they're making 2,000. There we go. That's half of their income wiped, right? So you get some of the upside, but you also protect them from the downside. So this is really what you need to understand. The psychology that you need to understand is really what the global market opens up to you in terms of how much you need to pay for incredible talent. And then also the fact that, especially when we're talking about people who do SEO, email marketing, advertising, if you find the right person and you manage to find someone with the right character traits, which I'll show you how to do all of this, right? And how to vet these people, you need to understand the thing that these people value more than anything is stability. You really think an accountant couldn't go out and do it on his own or be like a private accountant? Like for the amount that I'm paying my accounting firm, I guarantee I could just hire one of the accountants full time and they'd make the same amount of money. Like you really think, or they could even just be freelance and have, 10 accounting clients and they could probably make a 10K a month. Like seriously, as a good accountant. Why don't they do it? Because the nature, right, of someone who's an accountant, they don't want to sell, they don't want to prospect, they don't want to find leads, they want to go through all the hassle that we're going through. And let's call it what it is. Like, some people are like, prospecting is easy and it's just like I work like 3 hours a day and this. And by the way, you'll get to a point where you work 5 or 6 hours a day. And that's when you have a really, really, really strong CMO in place. And that's the only way that you're going to be able to do it, right? Is coming from someone who's running an agency for 5 years. And I'll be honest, most weeks I probably work 5 or 6 hours a week on my agency, but that's also because we get 80% of our clients through ads and because I have an incredible CMO who's been working with me for 3 years. Okay, that is the only reason. Okay, so you'll get to that point. But guys, let's call it for what it is, right? Prospecting sucks, right? It just does, but it's part of the business. For some of you guys, sales sucks. But whatever, like it's part of the business, right? And also it kind of sucks at first and then you actually, you really start to enjoy it. But these guys, these contractors, these guys and girls, I should say, they don't want to deal with it, okay? And that's totally understandable because if they did, then it poses the question of why doesn't just everyone have a business, okay? So you really need to get into the psyche of one of these contractors. And as I said, we'll be talking in depth and in detail about this in future phases. So speaking of the road ahead, let me give you a realistic roadmap to $10,000 a month. Now, there's time associated to these, but please remember that it takes some people 30 days to get to $10,000 a month, although that's very uncommon. And there's some people that takes 2 years. But usually what I have found in terms of getting to $10,000 a month, it takes between 9 to 12 months. That's kind of the most common I've seen. And by the way, that's me taking people who, it only takes them 3 months. And for some people who it takes 18 months. Now, I have never, and I'm saying this from the bottom of my heart, I have never seen it take longer than 2 years if you stick to it. Like if you commit to it, I've never seen it take more than 2 years. And by the way, we're so warped in our perspective when it comes to being in this industry. Like if you told any business owner out there that, hey, it takes, that someone would be complaining or someone would be have an issue with the fact that it takes 2 years to make $10,000 a month profit. Try telling a gym owner that who had to take out a loan from the bank, pay a lease, get all this, like he would be like, you're joking, right? Like he would almost find it insulting. Same thing with a restaurateur or pretty much anyone who starts a brick and mortar business. They'd be like, a person is complaining about that, the fact that it took them 2 years to get to $10,000 a month rather than 6 months. They would honestly find it offensive. So, I want to say that to give you a bit of perspective that, look, $10,000 a month is really that stage where you can kind of do whatever you want with your life. Of course, you can't have like rap music video experiences, but honestly, who cares, right? Like the greatest joy I ever had was not making $100,000 a month. It was when I got to $10,000 a month because that gave me the freedom and that allowed me the freedom to really do 99% of this. Okay, maybe not 99, but 95% of the stuff I wanted to do in this life. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm just going to go ahead and show you the checkpoints, right? And kind of give you some indication as to how to utilize this program. So checkpoint 1 is where you're at right now. And this is going to be from now until phase 4. Okay. So checkpoint 1 is where you go full focus on the program, right? You go full focus on the program and your entire, like everything you do is go through the program and apply the action steps. And that's all you need to focus on. Now, when you get to phase 4 and when you complete phase 4, which is all about prospecting, then you shift your focus. All right. So now 70% of your time goes to outreach and prospecting. And then 30% of your time is on the program and applying systems and stuff like that. So checkpoint 3 is when you get to phase 7 of the program. That's where you spend 60% of your time on prospecting and outreach, 30% of your time on the course, and the other 10% on finding a high quality contractor to be a part of your team. Now, checkpoint 4 is when you get to the end of the course and you're really in routine now, right? And 70% of your time, once again, needs to be on outreach, prospecting. The other 30% is about focusing on getting client results. And then also, once you found your contractor, really starting to build some synergy there. It's about rewatching the course, coming to live Q&A calls, rewatching the Q&A calls, watching over your sales calls, engaging with the community, and really making sure that you're not stagnant. But remember, as an agency owner, 70% of your time should be on prospecting and outreach. Now, if you're delivering the services yourself, of course, you're going to have to skew that slightly, right? So still leave your morning focused work block as outreach and prospecting because that is the most important part of your agency. And then leave the evenings for service delivery. Now, real quick, ladies and gents, let's talk about the math to $10,000 per month. Now, your average retainer is going to be $2,000. I mean, you might have some that are more, you might have some that are less, but let's say an average retainer of $2,000. Now, I'm going to show you all this stuff, but you're going to do a 3-month minimum with all of your clients. Now, probably 5 months is going to be the average because you're in your first year. You might have some clients who stay on 8-9 months. You might have some clients that only stay for the 3. So if we take a blended average of 5 months as your, your retention rate, then the average lifetime value of a client is $10,000 to you. Now, for you to get to $10,000 per month, you're going to need 12 clients in a year. And that's pretty much about it. So that means in 365 days, you only need to sign 12 clients to make a predicted $100,000. And really all that means is that you need to sign 1 client every 30 days on average. And ladies and gentlemen, those are low estimates. Most people exceed these predictions in their first year. And as I said, this is after working with a lot of data over years and years of running this company. So ladies and gentlemen, I really just want to give you a little bit of a roadmap ahead. So when you're at a stage where you're making between $20,000 and $75,000 a month, let's be honest, guys, really here, you're just a glorified contractor. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, in all fairness, when I started my agency and, things really kicked off in 2017, I was running everything myself as a creative agency. So, I was a glorified contractor, although I was doing, pretty good. I was pulling in $20,000, $25,000 a month, in my high months. So, I was kind of financially, I may have been in a different stage, but at the end of the day, I was still a glorified contractor, and these numbers and these values I'm assigning are really the amounts that I see these sort of agencies make. But you could be a boutique agency, making $500,000 a year, but you're still stuck in the wrong paradigm. You could be a glorified contractor making $300,000 a year, but you're stuck in the wrong paradigm, okay? And you're not going to be able to evolve into the next one. So I've usually found that glorified contractors make between $20,000 to $75,000. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, these numbers are profit. Okay, I really don't give a shit about revenue. Then we have boutique agency, and this is really where you're making between $75,000 a year to $150,000 a year, right? Like you're specialized, you have one niche, you have one service. You have a contractor, whether that's a per month per client basis, or you have someone full time potentially, although it's usually not that common at that boutique agency phase. Then we get to between $150,000 and $400,000 a year in profit, and this is really where you are a lean, mean, results-driven agency. That says LMRM, but I meant to say LMRD, so. Apologies there. But yeah, lean, mean, results driven, LMRD. So this is where you're really starting to get dialed in, right? You've got your outreach on point. You're working with some appointment setters. You've got ads started running, and then you've got a full-time team member, maybe even 2 or 3 at that stage. And as I said, you're pulling in between $150,000 and $400,000 a year. So to kind of put that in layman's terms, usually between $10,000 and $30,000 a month profit. That's where that phase is. Now, the next phase, and this is where the thing is, the path is usually quite linear between glorified contractor and, usually the path is sort of linear between, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 a month to $30,000 a month. Once you get past that, I mean, it's explosive. And this is really when you become an agency/private equity incubator. And this is, I'm not talking about your agency income here. I'm talking about your overall income, right? So the agency is funneling this, but this is where you start putting money into investments. And because you're making so much money, each year you're pulling in $100K a year passive income, $200K a year passive income. And you're really becoming a savvy investor. And because you have so much cash flow, you're able to use leverage as well. And this is all stuff that I'll show you because I've done it in multiple different asset classes. And as I said, I've gone to a stage where I've made just as much money from my investments as I have from my agency. And as I said, that's between 4 different asset classes. So not only that, but then that's also where you become a private equity incubator, right? So not only are you working with clients and you are almost like their full service agency, but then you also have investments in them. So when the time comes, and this will happen, by the way, where one of your clients sells for 30 million and you got a 10% stake in them, guess who takes home 3 million, right? And this is really, and by the way, that's a small scale. I mean, if you do this stuff right, this is where you start making serious FU hundreds of millions. You look at some investors and they start off with 250,000. I mean, even if you just look at Tim Ferriss, I know you guys are thinking, oh, but yeah, that's Tim Ferriss. Well, yeah, no one took him seriously as a, this is the dummy. Like in people's mind, this is the idiot who wrote 4-Hour Workweek. Like imagine if the person who wrote 4-Hour Workweek came to you and was like, oh, I want to invest because I know a thing or two about business. And they wrote a whole book about like remote working, and you're a business with like offices in San Francisco, in Silicon Valley. You wouldn't take them seriously. So by the way, like Tim Ferriss, that's not an advantage at all, but it's well known that Tim Ferriss started off with something like 250, 500,000. And then he turned that into over 100 million through his investments. And by the way, that's just from, him injecting money and giving a bit of advice. Imagine if he also had the agency services to back it up. Ladies and gentlemen, when you build an agency, let's say you work with an e-commerce agency or you work with info products, you can get to a point where you can then invest in these businesses or even local businesses. Let's say you work with car dealerships, you know, car dealerships like the back of your hand. You get to a point where you're pulling in $500,000 a year profit with your agency. Now you can start investing in some of these. And the best part is you know how to grow them because you've done it for all of your clients. Ladies and gentlemen, not only just the investment side of things, which, as I said, I will show you guys everything I've learned to make an eye-watering amount of money. But where the other exciting bit comes in is where you become a private equity incubator. And as I said, the more well-known it is that, hey, this person not only has an incredible agency who can kind of build up any business from the ground, but this person, and by the way, sometimes you'll have to put money forward and sometimes you won't. Like, you know, there's some stuff that I don't talk about, but there's certain businesses that I have equity in, that I've put money in, and some that I didn't even have to put any money in. And just my expertise and my agency's expertise was enough. So this is really where things get, I mean, just FU money levels, right? And as I said, that's between, you know, that's where you'll be making 400,000 to 3 million a year, 5 million a year, 10 million a year. I mean, really the sky's the limit with that. In terms of your journey with Gray Agency, you might get into Agency Navigator and you might go, okay, you know what? I haven't really found any value from it. You know, I doubt that that's going to be the case for most people, but really what Agency Navigator does is it helps you get to $10,000 a month. You know, this is really our bread and butter. But what gets you to $10,000 a month doesn't necessarily get you to $30,000 or $40,000 a month or $50,000 a month. And that's really where Copy Paste Agency comes in. And that's where we hold your hands and you have really unprecedented access to myself and my team. And we show you all the core concepts that you need to go from that $10,000 a month to $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a month. And then we have Meridian Mastermind, where the people who, and you know, we see this time and time again. Someone comes in through Agency Navigator, or a lot of people through last version, Agency Incubator. They get to a point where they're like, oh, wow, like I did this and it worked and I make 10,000 a month now. Let me just keep falling down this path. And they go into CPA and they're like, oh, I'm making like 40,000 or 30,000 a month. And they're like, oh, okay, like what's next? And that's where they come into Meridian Mastermind, which is actually invite only. So actually we have to invite them. And that's where I share all of my investing stuff and all of the other crazy stuff that I can't really talk about on YouTube or program, because if I share it, and this is stuff regarding to the agency and really how to scale the agency up to 100, 150K a month. And you know, on our next goalposts are 200, 250K a month. And then some of these businesses, they will sell at some point and I'll get my 5 or my 10 million because of my equity stakes in them. And that's really the stuff that we share inside of Meridian Mastermind. So ladies and gentlemen, I want you to download that agency journey printout. It's, you know, it's that last slide you saw. And I want you to stick it somewhere where you can see it all the time. The reason I want to show you this is because I want to show you what is possible, right? Because you might have been coming into this process and you might have been thinking, okay, if I build an agency, I can build it up to maybe like 10,000 a month. Like I can build up my income to 10,000 a month or 20,000 a month. No, fuck that. Like you can get to a point where you're making insane amounts of money. As I said, especially the longer you stay in this game. Like when you've been in this game for 5 years, like I have, opportunities open up to you that you could not have imagined. By the way, bear in mind, you know how many high-level businesses you're working with at a certain point? So one of the other big benefits of running an agency is you start to network with really high-level business owners and you start working with really high-level clients. And then of course, opportunities open up, as I said, in terms of bigger performance fees, in terms of investing, in terms of all this stuff. So I really, you know, I will say I've been talking about, you know, some of the high levels, but in your mind, just forget that for now, right? Because I don't need you to focus on it. You know, the goal right here is to get you to $10,000 to $15,000 a month. That's really the bread and butter of this program. And you know, I've done everything in my power. I've spent obnoxious amounts of money in order to make it happen. Okay. So we're going to do it, right? Like I am here for you. Like I will say this again, but this is such a great honor that you trust me and I will not let you down. I know I have your full faith and I do not take that lightly. So between myself, Gray Agency as a company, you know, my team who you all know by name, all the money that I've spent on the platform, the infrastructure, everything to give to you guys, it is my number one mission to get you to $10,000, $15,000 a month. And the reason I want to show you that last slide is I said, really just to open up your mind that like, oh, this journey doesn't stop here. This journey can go in many different directions. And we'll talk about that at a later date. So print that out, put it up somewhere you can see all the time. I hope you guys enjoyed this module. I'll catch you in the next one.